This is to encourage you to do some fan fiction writing when you've finished reading a book that you really, really enjoyed. It was so enjoyable that you don't want to leave the book behind. You actually want to keep the story world going. And that's when you start writing fan fiction, because you're going to keep on authoring some aspects of the story that you've just read. So we're familiar with some people enjoying movies and books so much that they enjoy making fan art. So they have a great time imagining the characters, perhaps wearing slightly different costumes or in different situations. So fan fiction is a lot like fan art. It's when you imagine some of your favorite characters getting up to some new adventures. So what might this look like? Well, you've just finished reading a novel and you might decide to set a story with the same characters but right off in the future. Or you might decide to have your characters looking back at some memories that didn't come up in the book that you've just read. So the most important thing about your fan fiction is you're heading into new territory, but with some of the best ingredients that you really love. And something that happens a lot with fan fiction is that sometimes some of the minor characters have a bit more of a run in fan fiction, because we know a lot about the main characters, but we sometimes don't know what the minor characters have been thinking. So sometimes they actually get to play a major role in fan fiction. So there are ideas for fan fiction around perhaps having a reunion with some characters, or perhaps we discover that one of our characters had a secret that we didn't know about, and that's going to set off a whole new story. So fan fiction is really just totally up to you. You just take those characters that you really enjoyed reading about and you basically keep some stories going. And the fun thing about fan fiction is sharing your stories with people who also love the same series. So fan fiction is huge. There are just so many people writing it. And I just urge you to enjoy writing if you don't want to leave a book behind. Now, one of the fun things you can do is you can show your drafts to friends or show your writing to friends and ask them whether they'd be happy to critique your work. Having said that, this is not something that you have to do at all. This is just only if it's fun for you, because it can be really enjoyable to get some feedback from a friend. Now, what is homage writing? Homage writing is when you actually want to use some of the style of the writer whose work you've enjoyed. So fan fiction, that's when you don't want to leave the story world behind, and it is a kind of homage writing because you loved that world. But specifically homage writing and homage illustrations, they're actually really actively using the techniques that the author and illustrator used. It's like saying to the author and illustrator, I've learned so much from you that I'm actually going to use some of your techniques in my own work. So in a funny sort of way, whenever an illustrator or an author creates their work, they're representing an idea and bringing it out into the world. And that's why people can write so many different books about friendship or life at school or fantasy genre books, because each idea that the author is having is being represented, shown forth in a different way. So sometimes when you've finished reading something, you may not even have an urge to continue with that story world. You may have an urge to take a theme that you really enjoyed in the book and start a story of your own that picks up on that theme, but perhaps changes the tone dramatically or introduces a new kind of a character. So the fun thing about being inspired by writing is that when you start to write, you might write straightforward fan fiction, which keeps that story world going, or you actually might get inspired by some themes and some characters and really take them in a whole new direction. So here are some examples about ways in which you can make changes. Just have a lot of fun, really. You've read a story and you want to change it up a bit. You keep it moving, but you make some changes. Sometimes you may have read a book on a topic that you found particularly interesting, and you want to keep writing about that topic, but you want to make some changes of your own. So, for example, you've read a book about koalas, and it's a factual book, and you were really moved about the plight of koalas because they're having a hard time at the moment. And you've decided that you'd like to write a persuasive text to get other people to see things the way that you do. So sometimes there can be a big idea in a fiction text that you really find interesting. You've finished reading the text and you want to keep the theme, but you want to change an aspect of the writing to make it your own. So here we have a story featuring a shy wizard and a friendly prince, but at the heart of it is friendship. And so you might be struck by that theme, and after this is over, you might want to write your own story about friendship, but make some changes to the characters and to what's going on.